Today we're going to learn Moed Katan Daf Vav. Today's daf is sponsored by Debbie Ashem. Let's start from the beginning. Today's daf is sponsored by Sarah Bareilowitz in honor of her son Tani Sturman, who passed the bar exam. And today's daf is sponsored by Shira Hannah Fisher in honor of Rabbanit Michelle and all the amazing women learning every day. Today's daf is also sponsored by Debbie Ashem and Robert Weiss from New York City for Refuah Shlema for Jackie Betensky, Yaakova Ariela Bat Fruma. Jackie, your very recent Facebook post embody what Rabbi Abau taught in yesterday's daf, and provide an opportunity for the public to pray for mercy and healing on your behalf. May the prayer of multitudes, including those of the Hadron family, result in your speedy and complete recovery. Refuah Shlema. Okay, we're going to get started now with our daf. We're in the middle of dealing with the Beit HaPras. We're going to finish that up. We were learning about Siyun Kever. We actually have a little bit of in today's daf to learn about putting up grave markers. One of the things I want to go back and talk about is one of the things, it's actually not a complicated Masechah. We talked about yesterday a little bit of how it's a bit of a complicated Masechah, but what's really more complicated about this Masechah than other Masechtot is, first of all, everything is learned by example, right? They don't really talk about, as we talked about the first day, the general principles behind everything. Kind of have to figure that out through every example. But the more complicated aspect is that each of these examples come from the reality of their lives, what their fields were like, what equipment we're talking about, what types of, for example, how they put up grave markers. We don't really know, right? Nowadays we have tombstones, but they didn't seem to have tombstones then exactly. We will see stones, but it's not clear they're really tombstones. And it's a little bit hard, not only for us, okay, we're coming, almost 2,000 years later, depending on whether we're talking about the Mishnah or the Gemara, but coming so much later, we don't really know the reality of their day. But not only that, the commentators who were living a few hundred years later didn't live in the same reality as the people did. The people, the Amoraim, didn't live in the same world that the Tanaim were living in, right? Most of them started in Israel in the time of the Tanaim. Many moved to Babylonia. We're talking the reality even between those places was different. So a lot of the complication here is actually figuring out what they're talking about. And I'm trying to make your lives a little bit simpler, but there's many things that I'm going to translate that you might have a translation in front of you that says something different, because there's many different explanations of all sorts of things, because the reality of what these were was unclear, and everybody kind of took either based on the reality that they had in front of them, or maybe based on just what they thought the Gemara was talking about. So it's very interesting in terms of understanding, right? It makes it a little bit complicated, but it's very interesting, especially if you were to learn this in depth, and you would learn, oh, this statement could mean this, could mean that, it could mean that, and that could mean this line could be a question, it could be an answer, it could be, there's all sorts of different ways to understand, which is, again, going back to Masechet Megillah, it's always the problem with translation that you only see one way, and it's a bit of a problem with, I should say, even my Shiur, because I'm going to tell it one way, and you might see it a different way. So I'm just going to I wanted to do a zoom out and kind of have a sense of some of the complicated aspects of this Masechet that come to light as we go through, when it's not exactly clear what the reality of each of these situations. And then obviously what you derive from the situation depends on how you understand the reality of it. And that obviously will be different depending on your interpretation. The other thing I actually neglected to mention, which I kept meaning to, but forgot, is that Rashi here is not actually Rashi. Okay. The Rashi that you see where Rashi normally is some manuscript that's, says Rashi, but it's not actually Rashi wrote it. Okay. That's what people assume. So just so you know, when I say Rashi, it's not actually Rashi. Okay. With that intro, we're going to get started. We were in the middle of this sugya, and I'll go back a little bit, of Beit HaPras. We talked about there's three types of Beit HaPras. I'm going to ignore the stebochin for right now, the place where they would cry and they would leave the bodies, and sometimes, where they would visit the bodies before, kind of say their parting words, and sometimes maybe body parts will fall, or they just wanted to designate it. That's one thing. But now we have two other kinds that we were dealing with. One is where it's a field. It was a dead body buried there, but you just don't know where in the field it's buried. Or actually reading a book about this right now, where their mother's buried somewhere and they don't know exactly where she's buried. It's this somewhere in there, right? It's actually very common. It was about a tobacco plantation, and the mother died young, and they buried her somewhere in the field, and they have no idea really where in the field her grave is. The kids are very upset that they never really found out, nobody ever bothered to say where exactly she was buried. So it's very common that you could have an area where that people buried someone, but you have no idea where in the field. So that's obviously a big safek, because if a Kohen walks through, it's ohel, right? Because it's a body or a big part of a body. Then we get to the next case, which is nechrash ba'kever. If that field gets plowed, then we assume the bones got all broken up. At this point, there's no tumat oil anymore. It's only if you touch them. And then we said the Kohen has to kind of, blow as he walks, or I saw in the pictures, they have a fan. He puts a fan to kind of fan the dirt in front of him so that things kind of jump up and any bones that are near the surface won't actually touch him. Then we said that a sedesha nechrash ba'kever doesn't need a marker because, again, the marker is all in case, right? If you actually see little pieces of bone, so you make sure not to touch them. The whole reason to mark it off is to tell you there's something. If you walk over it, there's dead body under the ground. So you don't need a marker, to which the Gemara says, but wait, there's a bright where it says you do need a marker, right? And it said, if you find a marked field and you don't know whether it was plowed or a dead body was or whole dead bodies under there, you base it whether there are trees. If there are trees, you assume it was plowed to get the trees planted or to help the trees grow, that it's been plowed. And if not, you assume it wasn't plowed. So now the Gemara says, and then there was the statement of Rabbi Yehuda that really you can't assume it was plowed unless you have a child unless you have a zaken and elderly, or a talmid. Talmid is not a child. Talmid is a talmid chacham. You need a talmid chacham or a zaken, an elder, not necessarily elderly person, but what we call skinim, an elder who tells you, because they're the ones who know whether it was plowed and there's no longer a whole dead body under there. We'll get back to him in a few minutes. So here we saw it could be a sedeh that was plowed, and yet it has a marker. Why did we say they don't have markers? To which Rav Papa said, oh no, it had a marker because originally, right, any beta pras starts off with someone buried under there. Then we can assume it was plowed and you can't see them anymore. But there's no full body down there. But the marker was from before, so it doesn't teach you anything about needing a marker if the field was plowed. Now the Gemara says, but just because there's trees, how do we know that the field was all plowed and wherever the grave was plowed? Maybe, lichush, I'm now 2 lines from the bottom of Hamlet Bet. Maybe the trees are on the outside and the trees are on the inside and the grave is barai on the outside. Remember, bar is out, wild, bright is chutz, it's something outside of the Mishnah. So the answer, Kedamar Ula, as Ula said somewhere else, we've had this a whole bunch of times recently, where both at the end of Megillah and at the beginning of Moed Katan, where in order to get an answer for our question, we're going to quote something somebody says in a totally different context. This is from Masechet Nidarim, someone we'll get to sometime later this year. As Ula says, maybe you'll remember it when we get there and we'll see the context. Be'omdim ala gvulim, it's where the trees are on the border. Hachanami be'omdim ala gvulim, also here, it must be the trees are on the border. If they're on the border, right, then you can't say maybe the kever is on the border because the trees are on the border. To which the Gemara asks the obvious question, well, if the trees are on the border and not in the middle, so we know the grave, if it was on the outside, right, it would be all crushed up now and it's fine. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe then the trees are on the border and maybe the inside of the field, there's a full dead body that never got plowed up and broken up into pieces. So the answer, it must be a case where the trees are all over, scattered around the entire field. And that's why we can assume that wherever the dead body was, it was plowed already. And again, then you wouldn't have to worry about passing through this field in terms of tumat oel. You still have to worry about touching a bone, but you don't have to worry about walking over one that you don't see. A second possibility to answer this question is ha'amaran. We already said yesterday that we don't want to lose too much ground in Israel to be able to walk on. So we don't want to make all this extra space into problematic space, grave space. So if you have a marker, we're assuming the marker is next to a tree. If you have a marker next to a tree, you have to assume that the grave must have been right near the tree and therefore it must have been plowed underneath. And you don't have to start saying, well, maybe this, maybe that. It's obvious then that we're in the area, we're in the vicinity where the tree and the grave were near each other, in which case, again, what's the problem? Then you have to worry that maybe it got far. First of all, there's 2 things. Number one, you have to worry that if it got plowed up, the bones got moved from here to, remember we said you have to go like the length of a furrow, a certain amount of space, because you have to assume it got broken up and you might touch it there. But you also don't have to worry about tumat ohel because you can assume it was broken up. Okay, new issue. Now we're going to move to Rabbi Yehuda, who said, we assume that who knows about whether there was a body and then it got plowed up and broken up into pieces. Who's in charge of that? The Zkinim and the Talmidei Chachamim. They're the ones who are in charge of this. Now, it's a little bit surprising because you would have thought, who is it? The municipality of the city, right? Again, we're going to learn a little bit about the reality. And even Abaye is going to say, well, from the fact that this Braita says something, you can learn, even Abaye is saying the same way we like to learn something about the history and what happened and the reality, I would say, of what happened in those times. So comes Abaye and he says, Amar Abaye, Shma mina tzorva merabanan deika bemata, komile demata ale rambya. If there's a Talmid Chacham in the city, he is responsible for all sorts of municipal things that go on that have halachic relevance. Okay, so basically we're saying the Talmid Chacham, his eyes aren't always in the books and in the Beit Midrash. No, his responsibility is to be on top of all these kind of things. So therefore, they're the ones who really know because they know halacha and they have this responsibility toward the community. So it shows how these community, some of the responsibilities of the city were actually on the shoulders of the Talmidei Chachamim. That's what Abaye infers from this Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're going to get to, okay, I don't know if you've traveled around Israel, but if you travel around Israel, okay, it's a little bit different in other places, although it must be a model that appears elsewhere. I know, let's say in America, it's different. But if you hike in Israel, hikes, there's a whole marking system of hikes. So they take stones and they paint on stones. And sometimes they even paint on the ground. Okay, these little markers that tell you, oh, you're on the green trail, the black trail, the blue trail, right? So there's all these markers on the ground. Now, once in a while, you'll get to a hike and it'll be worn away. And it's part of the job of, the Karen Kayemet Israel or the I forget what it's called, but the Chavra Laganat HaTeva, their job is to go and repaint them and take care of the paths. But sometimes they don't, and it gets worn away and you can't really see. And, and sometimes you notice them from a distance and sometimes you don't. So now we're going to talk about markers for graves. How did they mark graves in those days? And again, you're going to learn from what they discussed, what the reality was. But again, you might be getting only reality from a certain time period. Okay, so we don't really know. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Matzah. Now, we have to preface this by what we said yesterday, which is if you see a marker of a grave, you have to, if you remember, we said you have to distance it a little bit because otherwise the Kohen will miss the marker. And I was trying to think about why the Kohen would miss the marker. I was imagining a grave marker that's a stick with a sign that says grave, kind of the way they do it in cemeteries before they put up a tombstone. There's a little stick with a sign that says the person's name. And so that's kind of what I had in my head. But it seems from here that no, what they were talking about in yesterday's stuff was something on the ground, and possibly it was a little limestone. They would paint the ground with limestone, which again, you wouldn't see until you actually show up there. You get there and then you see it because it's not above ground. So it comes Rav Yehuda and says, if it is above ground, like matzah even mitzuyenet, you see a rock, that's a rock of a marker. Okay, let's say it had limestone on the rock or something like that. If you see a rock, a stone, as a marker, if you look in the pictures of today's daf that I send the links out to from the Marot Daf Yomi, see, they have a big stone. We're not talking like a little stone, but a big stone is a marker. You can assume tachtea tameh, just under the stone is tameh, that stone is marking off where the grave is. And it's not actually before the grave because the assumption is this is high up and you can see it from a distance. So you don't need to distance it from the grave, but this is a sign the grave is exactly underneath here. Shtayim, what if you see two stones? So what is this stone? Where's the grave? Well, it depends. Im yesh sid benehem, here's the limestone. If there's, let's say, a white line, you can see it in the pictures also. There's a white line connecting these two stones. Then benehem tameh. Then you assume that what's this telling you? From here to here is a body, okay, or bodies. The im ein si benehem. If there's nothing in between them and it's just stone and stone. So now, benehem tahol, we assume that in between is pure and it's just under the stone that's a problem. Okay, so now the Gemara comes and says, wait a minute. Okay, now this word choresh, different interpretations, we'll go with even if it's yesh choresh means it's plowed, okay? Even if there's choresh benehem, a plowed space between them. So wait, Now we're going to have a braita, okay, that contradicts this. Sorry, I was reading the wrong spot. Even if it's not plowed, okay, even if it's not plowed, we can assume that between the two is tahor. Now what does this plowed have to do with it? So we don't know yet. V'hatanya, and I will say the plowed interpretation is a little bit difficult, which is why some people explain it in some other way, but we're going to go with the plowed. V'hatanya matza even echat mitzuyenet tachtea tameh. Okay, so far that matches. One stone underneath it's tameh, not anywhere else. V'im lav, and if not, I'm sorry, I'm losing my place. That's what we just read. Shtayim, if there's two, now you would have expected im yesh si benehem, but that's not what it says. Im yesh choresh benehem tahor. If it's plowed in between, then between the two is actually fine. V'im lav, if it's not plowed, benehem tameh. So there you see that this choresh is relevant. So why wasn't that mentioned in what Rav Yehuda said? Seems like Rav Yehuda is contradicting a braita. So Amar Rav Papa explains, and now we'll see in a minute what the relevance of the choresh is or not. When the braita was talking about it, they were talking about a particular situation. Rav Yehuda was talking about where you don't see any seed, because he said, "Ein seed benehem." The braita was talking about when there's two stones with some limestone between, but it's worn away. This is why I gave the example of the markers of the path and the height, because sometimes it's worn away. Now, why is it worn away? So now they're going to say like this. There's sid shafuch al rashehen. Okay, now there's limestone on top of the stones and in between on this part that was plowed, or maybe not plowed. So that's the issue. If it's plowed, then benehem tahor. We're going to assume that what happened, if I see two stones with limestone on top of them and limestone in the middle scattered about, if the field was plowed, I can assume what? The limestone that's in between here just fell off the top of the stones. And then the stone is a marker for the grave, but not each grave is in its own place. The limestone in between has nothing to do with the grave marker. It just fell off from the stones. But elo, if not, if it wasn't plowed, and I see this very, spotty kind of limestone, well then, seed de bene benehu. I assume that the seed is the seed that was put in between these two stones. It wore away over time, vitamei, and therefore it's impure, because I have to assume there used to be a big line here and it just wore away. So that's when choresh is relevant. But what Rabbi Yehuda is talking about is if there's no seed at all. If there's no seed at all, then the choresh is totally irrelevant. So therefore, there's no more question on Rabbi Yehuda. Another issue with markers of graves. Amar Rabbi Asi, and with this we'll finish this topic. Metzar echad mitzuyan hu tameh v'chol hasadeh kula torah. What if I have a field, and on one side of the border of the field is this white limestone strip? So I can assume underneath it is where the body is, and nowhere else in the field. Therefore, the rest of the field is tahor, is pure. Shnayim, what if I have two borders of my field, okay? Marked off. Same thing, underneath them, border markers, but not anywhere in the middle of the field. Shlosha, if you have three, now you already think maybe three is indicating that the whole field is a problem. No. Still, the whole field is tahor. Arba'ah, but if you have four strips around of four, you painted limestone around the four corners of your field, all the sides, now it becomes interesting. Hein tehorim, underneath these markers, we assume it's tahor, because that's just setting out the borders. And what it really means is inside, okay, the whole field is impure, except for what's under the stripes, because the strips of limestone are basically marking off the inside border and not the place itself. Because we learned before, right? You don't make it too far. So the fact that they're doing it around all four borders must be saying everything on the inside. Now we're moving to the next part of our Mishnah. And here we're going to get to some really fascinating information, not just information, again, partly about the reality of what they lived in and partly about when we see a problem and we want to correct a problem, how sometimes we have an idea of what we think will be successful. And then sometimes we have to learn from our mistakes and realize that that wasn't really a good solution and we have to change the solution. Okay, it's hard to not think about the Chok HaGiur that is now up in the, not to get into politics or anything, but it's what I hear about in my house all the time about the new conversion bill. People want to fix it, but the question is, what are going to be the ramifications of the way that they're fixing this? Is this going to be the right way to do the bill or not? And people don't always think about what are the ramifications of the detail. The details are sometimes very important. So you have to pay attention. So here goes. Yotzim afala kilayim. We learned in the Mishnah that one of the things you do on Chol HaMoed, now until now we've been talking about what you're allowed to do, right? You're allowed to water your field. If it's in this situation, if it's that, you're allowed to do all sorts of things. If the streets get ruined, you can fix them up, etc. Then it says, the last words are yotzim. Now it said actually af ala kilayim, even on the kilayim. Many people take out the word af. Okay, you can even see here the word af appears, but many places take out the word af, not even, but yotzim ala kilayim. What does it mean, yotzim ala kilayim? If the landowners didn't take out the kilayim of their fields, didn't uproot it when they were told you're supposed to, so come the messengers of the court, their job is, and this is in and of itself very interesting, right? You might think what I do in my own private field is my problem. Well, no, there's communal responsibility. We can't have it that your field is growing kilayim. Again, what's kilayim? Diverse kinds. It means you grow two different types of things. I'm not going to get into all the details, but near each other. We'll see the measurement of what you have to take out if this grows, like what kind of measurement grows that you have to actually remove it. And we basically say we don't want these things growing near each other, right? They might become grafted. We don't want them growing so close to each other, so you have to remove it. Okay, so now we'll talk about what we remove. We'll get to that soon. So now they say, if you didn't take care of it in your field, which is very interesting, I have the rights as the court to come into your field and take it. And not only do I have the rights, but this was something they did on a regular basis. And our Mishnah is telling you, the messengers of the court get sent out on Chol HaMoed, which is a bit of a strange time, right? Don't they want to celebrate the holiday? Isn't that the whole thing that we're trying to get people to, right? If you heard Ayala Lipson's introduction, right? The whole thing is to get you to, and I talked about this at the Shiur, to get you in the mood, right? You're supposed to be having a holiday type of atmosphere. So here these Shlichei Beit Din are sent out on Chol HaMoed. That seems very strange. So the first problem is going to be, so again, they understand this as this is when the shlichim are supposed to go out, the messengers. So they say, really, on Chol HaMoed? But forget about that, it's Chol HaMoed. We're going to ask a different question. Uriminu, this contradicts the first Mishnah Masechet Shkalim, which you might remember. Be'echad ba'adar mashmi'in ala shkalim. And we talked about this very recently. On the first of Adar, we learned this in Megillah. The first of Adar, they announced about the shkalim. We learned about this when we talked about Parashat Shkalim. And they would warn people and say, okay, your field's growing now. Now you'll see that maybe something's growing and then close to another, and time to uproot it. Like this is the time when things grow, so it makes sense. The Chamisha Sarbo, they give people 15 days, 2 weeks or 14 days. On the 15th of the month, one of the things you do is Kolin et Megillah b'krachim, right? All the walled cities read the Megillah. These are all sorts of things that happen on the 15th of Adar. Yotzin lekavetzet hadrachim. These are all things that we saw yesterday. You start taking out the thorns from the roads if there's a problem. L'taken harechavot, to fix the streets. Lamud hamikvaot, to measure the mikvahs. These are all the things that you might have to redo on Chol HaMoed if something went wrong, if it rained again and they got ruined, etc. Ve'osim, but really you're supposed to start on the 15th of Adar getting ready. Ve'osim kotzarchei rabim, you do all these things for public use because everybody's coming on Aliyah LaRegel soon. Umitzaynim et hakvarot, you mark the graves. We already talked about this. Ve'yotzim ala kilayim. What does it say here? You go out. The messengers go out and start already. They only give you 2 weeks. That's it. After that, they start coming into your fields. So how does that work with this? This says on Chol HaMoed, a month later, a month and a day. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Chad Amar. So they each gave an answer. One said, Kam b'bachil, kam ba'afil. There's crops that grow early. Those get dealt with on the 15th of Adar, but there's crops that only start coming out later. Okay, so in other words, sometimes you have a wheat crop and there's the first, and then there's the second group that grows. So the first group that grows, you deal with an Adar, but when things start growing more in Nisan, then you have to go out on Chol HaMoed. One said it's the difference between zra'im and yirakot. Okay, between the grains which grow earlier and the vegetables which grow later. So again, it's the same type of answer. It's just you're talking about two different types of grains or two different types of produce in general. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, lo shanu ela she'ein nitzan nikal, aval nitzan nikal yotzim alehem. You wait for those dates if there's no clear noticeable bud. But if you see something budding even before the dates or in between the dates, then you could go any day. But this is if you don't see something clear coming out, then you go and you check the fields and then you go take out whatever you can find. Okay. Now the Gemara asks the really big question, which is fascinating, which is, we don't really want people to work on Chol Hamoed. So why are we going out specifically? We're hiring people to be messengers of the court to do this on Chol Hamoed. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to get an economic answer. Mishum schar pe'ula demoz legaban. It's a very good time to get cheap labor. Okay. Now you might think, right, people don't work. So if you want workers, well, the supply is low, demand is high, right? But the problem is that the demand is really not high. Nobody's looking for workers at all. And anyone who's desperate to work is going to want to work for any kind of money they can get. So therefore, it's a very good time to find cheap workers. So we hire people then. Okay, very right. It's almost like telling you, well, we told you you're not really supposed to work, but this is a good time, by the way, if you want to hire workers and get a job done. So the Gemara says, well, or Rab Zvid, or maybe Itam or Rab Masharshia says, Shema Mina, you can infer from here, Ki avinan lehu sachal mitrumat halishka yavinan lehu. Who pays the money for these messengers who go out, these messengers of the court? It comes from the Trumat HaLishka money. Remember all that shkalim money, all the shkalim that we gave goes to the Trumat HaLishka. It pays for the sacrifices and it pays for all sorts of communal needs. One of them is these shlichim to go out. It must be their paying, and that's why we're trying to save money. Maybe it would be you have to pay for it. Let's say I'm a messenger of the court. I have to go into your field to take out your kilayim because you didn't do it. Maybe I charge you, right? Like when sometimes you get a delivery and then you have to pay for it, right? Even though you didn't order it. I don't know, like it's one of those, somebody sends you a gift, but it's pay on delivery. And then you have to end up paying. It's like that. I could come to your house and say, listen, I'm taking out your kilayim, but you have to pay me now. Well, if you had to pay, then we charge you whatever. It's not on our money or not on our bill. Of course, we could charge you any price. We don't need to look for cheap workers. But since we're looking for cheap workers, and that's why specifically they allowed it on Chol Hamoed, it must be because it's we want to save, right? And this is a good example of if you run a nonprofit, you have a shul, you have something, right? You have to be responsible and be smart about your money. You might in your own house spend whatever you want on whatever you want, but when it comes to communal funds, you have to be much more cautious about it. So you learn all sorts of interesting things from here. And interesting about the labor costs during Chol Hamoed. Right nowadays, if you work on a holiday, you actually get paid more money, right? Because people don't want to work and they need workers, and they actually pay more money because of it. But their logic was a little bit different. Va'ad kama. Now the question is, what someone asked before, what's the ratio that you call something kilayim? So Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak kotasha shaninu kol se'ah. If you have a se'ah of grain, let's say, and sheyeshba rova kav zera mimin acher, and then you have a different type. That's a quarter of a kav. Now, a quarter of a kav is 1/24th of a se'ah. Now, someone asked before, Joanna, you asked, how do you know which one to remove? Well, the idea is that there's one that's growing in a small amount next to something that's much bigger. So if the ratio is more than 1/24, then yima'et. You have to make it less than 1/24. Now, there's a big debate. Like I said, there's a lot of debates about a lot of things, how to understand this. Is it the seeds themselves? Is it before you planted, it was 1/24? And if it's 1/24, then you'd have to uproot it. Or do you have to, as it's growing, it's 1/24, and you have to basically get it down lower to that ratio? The main difference would be, do you have to uproot it entirely? Or can you just yima'et? Does yima'et mean take it out to the extent that as long as it's growing and the ratio is less than 1/24, you can leave it. So then you would just have to take some of it out. So there's a big debate about whether you have to uproot the entire thing or whether you only have to uproot part. Part of it is dependent on how you read this, but I'm not going to get into all the details of that. Now they say, wait a minute. And here comes another very interesting thing. And this is where we talked about that if you make a takana, you have to be careful to think about all the possible ramifications. And will this really resolve your issue? What in the end do they really want people to do? They want people to remove kilayim on their own. We don't want to spend communal funds to remove people's diverse kinds because they don't do it themselves. We want to ultimately encourage people that you should do this yourself. And that's why we send messengers. If you don't do it, well, the messengers are going to do it. But they didn't fully think things through, and therefore you'll see what happened. So first we get to this whole thing because of a contradiction. According to this, what do? Yima'et. What does yima'et mean? The messengers come and they take out part of, either they uproot the whole thing or they uproot part of it, so right, of whatever's growing mixed with something else, and that way you don't have an issue. The Hatanya, doesn't it say in a Braita? Hitkinu, they made a takana, okay, they instituted. Sheyihu mafkirin kol hasadeh kula. The messengers, okay, now you're going to see this wasn't very hard work. Okay, first of all, it's not hard work to begin with, and that's why it's okay on Chol Moed. All they have to do is uproot, right? It's like pulling out some weeds, okay? But really what they ended up having to do was even simpler than that. All they did was they'd see you have diverse kinds in your field. They'd announce, maybe put up a sign, your field is now ownerless, okay? Anyone can come and take whatever they want. So how does that work with what we just said? We said Yima'et. So what's this mafkirin kol hasadeh? How does that work with this Braita? And that was in Amora. How could he say something that contradicts an explicit Braita? Lo kasha kan kodim takana kama achar takana. Depended at what point in history we're talking about. There was before they made this institution and after. Once they made the institution, they were just mafkir. Then there's no yima'et. This statement was talking about before they made the takana that you're supposed to be mafkir. Ditanya. Now it is a little bit strange that in Amora would be talking about something before, right? The takana happened in the time of the Tanaim, before. So it's a bit of a weak answer, but we'll go with it anyway. Ditanya, and here go the different levels of what they did. Originally, what would they do? The messengers would come in. Let's say I'm the messenger. I come into your field, and I see you have some diverse kinds. I pull them out. Like I said, weed your field, basically. And I leave them on the ground. Well, what happened? The Balei Batim were very happy for two reasons. They said, number one, okay, free weeding, right? You came into my field, you weeded my field. What, right? What happiness was that for a landowner that someone came and took out all the weeds from my field? Number two, not only did you weed my field for me, but and you left it out in my field. Perfect. My animals will come and go eat it up. It's amazing. Number one, I don't have to clean up the weeds you left, and my animals will have food to eat. Perfect. They said, this is a good system. And then they said, well, if this is such a good system, then I don't need to do this myself. Somebody will come and do all my work for me. So they said, okay, this obviously didn't work. So let's try again. And you're going to see this didn't work either. Okay, there were some stages here, 3 stages. It's kinu shiu okrin umashlichim ala drachim. They said, okay, well, we don't want to make their lives so easy. So we're going to uproot it, makes the messengers work a little harder. We're going to take it with us and leave it on the street. And then it's not so easy for their animals to get there. So it wasn't too smachot, but they were still happy. They were still happy that their fields got weeded. So yeah, it's true. They lost a little bit for their animals, but it's still much better than trying to weed your whole field. So they, in the end, said, okay, this isn't working. This isn't working. People are just enjoying this and we're working harder. So they said, okay, this isn't a good system. We're going to actually penalize you seriously. And we're going to say that your field is ownerless and anyone can come take whatever they want. And that would be a serious disincentive now or incentive, I should say, for people to weed their own fields and take out their kilayim. So it's a very interesting in terms of, trying to fix things and then realizing, oh, that's not really right. Not thinking about what all the ramifications of this institution would be. Okay, new Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. We're going to have a machloket. I'll just preface this by saying machloket, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and the rabbis. The rabbis are lenient. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is stringent. There's a statement about Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that his mishnayot are kav v'naki, and therefore we often hold like him. Okay, so we're going to hold by this stringent opinion. The other thing to point out here is you're going to see the rabbis are permit here things that seem to be problematic earlier. And Rashi, or the Ktav Yad Rashi, this associated with Rashi here, says that this then there's a debate about this, and that's why I'm kind of saying it, but there is a debate that this Chachamim's opinion here is Rabbi Meir. Okay, sometimes it says Chachamim, but it's really a particular rabbi. It's Rabbi Meir. If you remember from the first daf, if you don't remember, I'll remind you. The first daf quoted a Braita, and it's also in the Tosefta, the first Tosefta, I think it's the first Tosefta in the Masechet, that Rabbi Meir is lenient, and he says, remember in the beginning we distinguished between a steh beit hashlachim, a field that needs irrigation, versus a steh habal, and we said a steh habal, which is a field that usually feeds off rainwater, you cannot water. Rabbi Meir said even that you can water on Chol HaMoed. So this lenient opinion of the rabbis, Rashi, or the Ktavia Rashi, associates it, the manuscript Rashi will call it, associates it with Rabbi Meir. And that's why the rabbis are permitting here, okay, which is this unique opinion, which most people don't hold by. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Moshchin et hamayim mi'ilan li'ilan. I have water by a tree. I can. Now it's unclear also here. Am I digging a ditch that's going to basically take the water from here to the next tree? Or am I just opening a channel that already existed? Okay, so there's a debate. Again, it's a matter of how much work do we permit, but you can do that to get from one tree to the other. But you can't water the whole field in between. You can't have it that it's a channel that spreads water out to the whole field. It just has to be very directed toward the tree. Some people actually read it. You can't trick and you can't sort of say, oh, I didn't mean for it to go to the whole field when you really did. Okay, kind of get around it by saying, oh, well, I was building this channel to the tree, but it somehow happened to get to the whole field. Now, obviously, we're talking about a field that doesn't need irrigation. Otherwise, it would be permitted. If you have things that didn't have water before the Moed, meaning they didn't really need to be watered, maybe you're now in a Beit HaShlachim, which generally needs water, but these really don't, then you manage with rainwater, lo yashkem b'moed, then you can't water them in the Moed because clearly, right, they didn't need it before, then they shouldn't need it now. The rabbis permit both, according to the simple reading of this. Again, some people debate. According to the simple reading, they permit both to do the whole field, which then you kind of have to say it's Rabbi Meir. Okay, some people say maybe the rabbis only permit the second and not the first, and then you can say the Chachamim are not Rabbi Meir. But they permit both. Okay, they think even if it didn't drink before the Moed, since it is a field that needs irrigation, you're actually allowed to irrigate it, even though you didn't actually give it water before. Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda now comes and modifies Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Even though Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov doesn't permit, he would permit in this case, imaita sadeh mitunenet, okay, which is a moist field that dried up, mutal. He allows it because at some point the field was moist, then it dried. We're going to allow this on Yantiv. Tanya Nami Hachi, a Braita to support this. Kshamru Chachamim, okay, there's going to say a lot of things in this Braita. We're really only looking for this one line about, we're going to see that this is clearly Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion, even though he doesn't appear here by name, but it's clear it's his opinion. And then we're going to see that mitunenet is mutal, and that's going to prove exactly what Rav Yehuda said, that according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he permits this. Here's our Braita. When they said you can't water your field on the holiday, on Chol HaMoed, they only meant things that didn't have water before the Moed. But ones that did drink, this is exactly what Eliezer ben Yaakov. He doesn't allow it if they didn't drink, but if you did water them before the Moed, this is a good example of, we all get used to certain things. So if it's, let's say, a non-irrigated field, it's a field that doesn't need irrigation. Okay, sorry, I should say it like that. It doesn't need irrigation. It lives on rainwater, but yet you normally water it, then it's used to that. And if it's used to it, then you're actually allowed to. Again, here comes the steh mitunenet. Says it's permitted. That's the proof. You can't water a dry field on the Moed, on Chol HaMoed. We'll get back to this soon. Again, you have the rabbis permitting both. Obviously, it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in the beginning, and the steh mitunenet is mutal. One inference now from the steh garid is, again, this one way to read this. I'll already tell you that. Ravina tries to infer from here what, or it does infer from here, that if you have a garden, you're allowed the harbitz. The harbitz is to drip water on, like as opposed to watering, heavy watering, it's kind of to pour some water on. It's not as serious as watering, and it's a garden. So you're allowed to do this on Chol HaMoed. Where does he get this from? Steh garid my taima, de'af lamash ve'le chorfa. The reason why, now, according to my reading, okay, again, I'm going by one interpretation. Some say this is actually a question on Ravina, but we're going to go with this as proves Ravina. That a stay garir, why is it permitted according to the rabbis? Because what it does is, it's a field that if you water it now, it will make things grow earlier. Eventually, it'll grow anyway. But if you water it now, it'll make things grow earlier, and that's allowed on Chol Moed according to the rabbis. So if they allow that, then they'll allow you to water your vegetable garden because that will also help them grow earlier, even though it doesn't really need your water. But you can sprinkle it, not exactly water it, but drip water on it, sprinkle water on it, okay, in a lighter kind of form. Tanu Rabbanit. If we're already talking about the sprinkling, marbitzim stei lavan b'shvi'it, okay, that's a wheat field. Avalo b'moed. This Braita says you can sprinkle a field of grains on the Shemitah year. Again, we're comparing Shemitah and Moed, but lo b'moed. I should mention now the Daf Mishalahen came out last night. If your Hebrew is good, worth listening to, where Rabbanit, Shiur, and Chamutal talk about the difference between, or the connection between the Shemitah issue and the Chol Moed issue. And it's a good intro. In addition to Ayala Lipson's intro, it's another good intro to the Masechet. Okay, so marbitzim stei lavan b'shvi'it but not b'moed. This distinguishes between what's allowed in Shemitah and what's allowed in Chol Moed. Again, some of the differences. Chol Moed, we're always worried about making you work too hard because we want to create an environment of holiday. Shemitah year, we don't want you to work, but because we want you to have kind of vacation, but vacation from, right, almost this break from being slaves to the land almost, right? We want you to not work the land, but it's only land-related issues, right? And things that the other issues. So number one, anything tirchi yatera is not really a big factor. It's more working the land rather than focus on the land rather than the working. Because you can work to build all sorts of things on the Shemitah year, you just can't do them on the land. And the second thing is that certain things we're going to allow in the Shemitah year because Shemitah is a whole year, and there's much more concern for things getting ruined if you don't do something for a whole year, rather than we might not permit on Chol Moed because it's only a few days. So here this says you can therefore sprinkle your field on Chol Moed, not on Chol Moed, but yes, on the Shemitah year. V'hatanya, but what doesn't it say in a contradictory Braita? Marbitzim bein b'moed bein b'shvi'it. You could do both. So Amar Rav Huna lo kasha ha-Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov ha-Rabbanan. The one who permits it on Chol Moed is the rabbis, and the one who doesn't permit it is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And there we simply resolve it. Tanya idach, another Braita. Marbitzim stei lavan erev shvi'it kedei sheyetzu yirakot b'shvi'it. You can sprinkle a field before the Shemitah year in order for it to grow on the Shemitah year. Not only that, you can water it on the Shemitah year if the produce is going to grow in the next year. According to this, it seems like it's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, but it's saying you can't do it, water it on the Shemitah year for it to grow in the Shemitah year, but you can do it before so it grows in the Shemitah year, or on the Shemitah year so it grows after the Shemitah year. Last section for today, new Mishnah, Tzadima ta'ishut, which is a mole, ve'eta achbarim, you can trap, okay, again, we're talking about work, how much work this is, and is it, you're going to have a financial loss. You're allowed to capture moles and mice, mistei ilan and mistei alavan, from a field with trees and a field with wheat or produce. Kidarko b'moed u'b'shvi'it, in a regular manner. This is like Shabbat, where we learned about shinoi, about change, right? You have to do things sometimes a little bit with a change. Well, doesn't matter whether it's a grain field or a field of trees. You can do it normally b'moed u'b'shvi'it because this is going to ruin your fields, and therefore it's permitted. So first of all, on Shvi'it, it's obviously permitted because you're not working the land by making traps. On Chol Moed, it's permitted, right? So again, they're putting them together, but they're very different reasons. Chol Moed is permitted because it's going to davar ha'aved, it's something that's going to cause a loss. So when it comes to a grain field, you can't do it in a normal way because it's not as much of a loss. You're not so worried that they're going to eat away at your field where you are when it comes to the stei ilan. You can fix a breach in the wall on Chol Moed. You can even build a wall. This is like a wall for your garden. You're allowed to even build a wall in the Shemitah year because, again, Shemitah has nothing to do with building. It has to do with working the land. Even though this is protecting your garden, let's say, but it doesn't make a difference. It's not related to Shemitah. My issue. So the Gemara wants to know what exactly is this. We already said it's a mole, but what exactly is it? Rav Yehuda defines it as a creature that doesn't have eyes. It can't see, basically. It has eyes, it's blind. Where do we see this from a verse? Nefel eshet bal chazu shemesh. Okay, this is a pasuk from Tehillim. Like a shablul, if its casing comes off, it's going to basically melt. Likewise, it will fall eshet, which is this ishut bal chazu shemesh. It doesn't see the sun. Okay, why doesn't it see the sun? Because it can't see. Tanu Rabbanan, last part for today, bringing in this bracket. So you can trap them in a normal manner. Not only that, an interesting thing we're going to learn now, you can also destroy antholes. How do you do this? We're going to learn some advice if you ever have this problem. Maybe you want to try this. Rashba Gomer, if you read the Quran, I have a really good footnote about the fact that this actually is true. Rashba Gomer, maybe afar michorzev and oten lechorzev vehen klonkim zetzeh. If you bring dirt from one anthole and you put it in a different anthole, they will choke each other because each of the ants won't be used to the smell of the dirt, and it will basically they'll die. Okay, but it has to be that you're taking dirt from the other side of the river, where there's no bridge that the ants could get across. There's not even a strip of wood that goes across the other side. And there's not even a rope that goes across. Any of these things exist, then it means that the ants can get from one side to the other, and they will be familiar with that dirt. So you have to take dirt that there's no way that the ant could have gotten to that dirt, and then the odor of the dirt or the smell will basically be foreign to it, and it will cause it to choke on it and die, and that's how you get rid of your ant holes, and that is apparently allowed to be done on Chol Moed. With that beautiful thought, we will end today's daf. Have a great day, everyone.